Going on offense. Let's play hardball. Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews up in New York. Let me start tonight with Barack Obama's forward pass. I'm talking about his decision to get out front on the immigration issue, to say that people who are brought to this country under the age of 16 shouldn't be punished. They shouldn't be chased and grabbed by the INS. From now on, even if they don't have legal status, they will be left alone to live and work here. It's fascinating to see the reaction from the right, isn't it? Romney and those who he wants to represent went silent on this. He whined a bit about Democrat Congresses not doing this before. Democrat, when used as an adjective, is what Republicans say when they're frustrated. Democrat Congresses. But tonight, this Monday after the weekend, the people raring to grab the White House remain tongue-tied. The president proved again he knows how to use his office. If being the incumbent forces him to play defense, it doesn't stop him from playing offense. Joining me right now are two of the top political thinkers in the country, John Hollman of New York Magazine and David Corn of Mother Jones. Both are distinguished authors. David more recently with his trenchant musings in Showdown. Let's take a look at the latest commentary. What I want to look at here tonight and start with is Mitt Romney and how he started this campaign. He was even further to the right on immigration, the rest of the far-right wing in this campaign. He tangled with Newt Gingrich, for example, back in January in a debate. Let's listen to how he positioned himself on the far right, the most anti-immigration policy. Here he is.
Is he still the most anti-immigrant candidate?
I think of the four of us, yes.
Go ahead, Governor.
That's simply inexcusable. That's inexcusable.
You tell me what language you would use to describe somebody who thinks that deporting a grandmother or a grandfather from their family, just tell me the language. I'm perfectly happy for you to explain what language you'd use.
Mr. Speaker, I think I described following the law as it exists in this country, which is to say I'm not going around and rounding people up and deporting them. What I said was people who come here legally get a work permit. People who do not come here legally do not get a work permit. Those who don't get work will tend over time to self-deport.
Self-deport. Romney planted his stake to the right of Rick Perry as well. Let's listen to that.
In the state of Texas, if you've been in the state of Texas for 3 years, if you're working towards your college degree, and if you are working and pursuing citizenship in the state of Texas, you pay in-state tuition there.
If they came for a handout, they'd be voting for Democrats. With regards to illegal immigration, of course we build a fence. And of course, we do not give in-state tuition credits to people who've come here illegally. That only attracts people to continue to come here and take advantage of America's great beneficence.
Wow. Well, in the January 16th GOP debate, Mitt Romney laid out his hard line on immigration. Let's listen to that.
I think we have to follow the law and insist that those that have come here illegally ultimately return home, apply, get in line with everyone else.
Well, there you have it. I want to start with David Corn on this. David, it seems to me he's laid out pretty simply. The law will be enforced. It will be enforced with a terror, if not, if it hasn't been before. In other words, you go home where you came from, where your parents brought you here from. You go home and you wait in some line that's there waiting for you to join, and you start all over again in life. And that's the deal I'm offering you people here who came here without papers. That's the Romney line. How's it going to stack up against Obama, who's now offered to not basically go after anybody under 30 who came here under 16?
What Romney has done is put himself into a pair of cement shoes. He has taken the most extreme position you have. You know, I'm not saying it's not an unprincipled position. It's a logical, coherent, very, very severely conservative position, which is we're not going to do anything about the 12 million people here who are undocumented or their kids or anything like that. Everyone has to go home and that's it. End of story. It's a consistent position. It just doesn't match reality. It doesn't match policy reality because I can't work as a policy, and really doesn't match political reality, which is why he's been so tongue-tied ever since the president took the offensive on this on Friday.
How's this any different than the big boat argument of people when it came to African Americans after the Civil War? This idea of put them on a boat and send them back where they came from. You know, he says it in polite language, but that's what Romney's been saying. Get home where you came from, start all over again.
Well, he is right when he says it has been the law of the land, and it's not.
Everybody knows that there'll be an accommodation at some point.
Well, everyone thinks and hopes that there will be, and I think what the president's done is the right thing to do in terms of beginning to take a step towards a humane and sensible immigration policy. But the political realities are much more stark, I think, than the policy. The policy thing is going to be either worked out on a bipartisan basis in Obama's second term or in a Romney administration, one way or the other, because there's got to be bipartisan support for whatever kind of a comprehensive plan gets done. Romney's problem is that this puts him on the wrong side of maybe the most important single demographic group in the electorate right now, a group where Republicans are in serious long-term trouble, and Romney has put himself in serious short-term trouble because he's made himself terminally unpopular with Latino voters. And if he doesn't get at least 36, 37, 38, really probably more like 40%, he probably can't win the election.
Let's bring it up to date. Yesterday on Face the Nation with Bob Schieffer. Bob Schieffer asked him the question. Here is his answer. He had no response, apparently, to repeated attempts by Mr. Schieffer to try to get an answer on what he thought about President Obama's executive order of Friday, which did what I said, which allows people under age 30 who came here under age 16 to basically stay. Let's listen.
Would you repeal this order if you became president?
Well, let's step back and look at the issue. With regards to these kids who were brought in by their parents through no fault of their own, there needs to be a long-term solution.
But would you repeal this?
Well, it would be overtaken by events, if you will, by virtue of my putting in place a long-term solution.
Would you leave this in place while you worked out a long-term solution, or would you just repeal it?
We'll look at that. We'll look at that setting as we reach that.
Well, that's almost as good as not doing the Sunday shows. I mean, we wondered why he wouldn't do the Sunday shows. He did show up, like Woody Allen. He showed up, but he didn't answer the questions. And we got a whole bunch of them later in the show. He didn't answer the question. Why did he show up on a Sunday television show if he didn't intend to answer the most obvious question? What do you think about what happened Friday? It's on Sunday. What do you think happened Friday?
That's a very good question, Chris. And I think he made the agreement to go be on the show before he knew that Barack Obama was going to make this move on Friday. News. Well, before he knew that there was going to be. This is a pretty dramatic thing that Obama did on Friday. Not something that the Romney campaign anticipated them doing. I'm not making excuses for Romney here. He should have an answer to this. But I think, it points to the thing I was talking about before, which is that he does not. He's trying to somehow etch-a-sketch his way out of the position that he took in the primary, which is he was against the DREAM Act. He's in this place that's as far as Newt Gingrich said, further to the right than any other Republican candidate. But he can't be there and win the election. So now he's trying in some way to get a holding pattern going here so he can eventually start to try to slide away from his own position.
Okay, well, look, it seems like this is one area where Romney, David Corn, has stuck himself so far to the right. We've often asked how far you can etch-a-sketch your way after a primary fight. If you spend the whole primary fight saying, I'm going to be the toughest person on Hispanic people here who don't have papers, I'm going to be to the right of Newt, the right of Perry, the right of Santorum, the right of anybody who runs here, Ron Perry, Ron Paul especially. I'm so far right, you can't get to my right. And then he says, oh, by the way, I'm doing an about face. I'd like to get some Hispanic votes. Can he get away with it?
This is the perfect encapsulation of the Romney campaign. He went far right, and you played the clip, Chris, when he said there is only one solution here. People go back to where they came from no matter what, and then we deal with it then. Then when Bob Schieffer asked him the same question 3-4 times, not only does he not have an answer to it, he says, well, I'm going to do a long-term solution. What do you mean? He already gave us his solution. His solution was to send them back, self-deport, whatever you call it. So he has a solution. He just can't talk about it now. And the fact that he knew on Friday that this was happening, he did the interview, I think, on Saturday, and couldn't answer the question. It's his campaign that is running ads that say on day one, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this on day one. What's he going to do day one about this directive?
Yeah, I know.
Apparently, he doesn't know and doesn't have a clue.
Yeah, well, the people who have come from Hispanic background, I don't know how many generations they've been in this country, a lot of people, they're going to have to think dearly about this guy's emotional state, why he was so comfortable taking that anti-immigrant position. By the way, on the issue, I usually argue with neoconservatives, but on one issue they're pretty good. That's on immigration. Here's Bill Kristol of the Neoconservative Weekly Standard praising President Obama's executive order of Friday. He said Romney's got trouble here. Let's listen to Bill Kristol.
I think it's a sensible policy. I think it would be much better if that were the law of the land, and I think the president's pushing the edges of the limits of prosecutorial discretion and saying we're not going to enforce a law in order to leave these people in the country, but I think it's the right thing to do, actually. I think this is a big problem for Romney, and he needs to take the lead on this. In my view, embrace Marco Rubio's DREAM Act if that's what he wants to say. Let's pass this in Congress over the next 2 months. This is what I'm for.
This must scare him, David Corn, to have a guy as far right as Bill Kristol, who is pretty good, I guess, on immigration issues, to say you're so far out, you're in trouble here.
Well, also, I'm waiting for the business community. Remember, the business community doesn't take this hard line on immigration that Romney took to get the Tea Partiers on his side.
Right,
so there's a split within the Republican Party here. But I think Bill is sort of behind the times here, because there's no way at this point in time that Romney can take the lead on this. You know, he's already said that he's not that interested, or he's indicated he's not that interested in the Marco Rubio approach. So if he embraces it, we'll have yet another flip-flop on Romney. I think he's shot himself in the foot, and he can kiss a lot of the Latino vote goodbye. I don't know what he's going to do to get it back.
You know, John, I always wonder how gay Americans who are up to date on politics would take a Republican position when it's so clearly that party's identified itself as anti-gay rights. And here you have another pretty direct statement by Romney in the campaign. I'm not on your side on immigration issues.
Well, there are, to answer the question you asked, David, I think you look at first. Bill Kristol, there's a bright line in the Republican Party between those people who recognize demographic reality and those who don't. He was sitting on that interview set on Fox with Karl Rove, another guy who recognized that Republicans had to be right with Hispanics, George W. Bush. And those guys, this is not neocon versus paleocon. This is, we recognize demographic reality and those who don't. As for Latinos, look, there is, if you go around to focus groups in the Southwest, there are older Hispanics who resent illegal immigrants as much as some white Americans do. So it's
what is the reaction to people that don't like them, though? It's one thing to have a conservative view on the law. What do you do when you hear there's people in politics who just don't like it because you're Mexican American?
Well, I think those people. It's very hard to get someone who to vote for you if you think that if you believe as a voter, if you believe that the politician hates you as an ethnic group. But let's be clear: there is in the Hispanic community, there's not a uniform view about what to do around illegal immigration, and there are.
Go ahead, David. But on this particular issue, when we're talking about kids who have been brought here, through no fault of their own, we're not talking about people who snuck in and been here 20 years who are adults. I mean, this is about as sympathetic and a group as you can get on immigration reform. And for Romney to be behind on this, it's a big gap that he's not going to be able to close, even if he takes Bill Kristol's advice.
I think he made a calculated decision to win the nomination and then fight from there on. Do whatever it took to get the nomination, go as far right on every single issue. Taxes, foreign policy, Iran, Mexican Americans coming here. Every issue, if you could get to the right, you go as far right as you could. Calculated that you could do some pirouettes, what they call them, etch-a-scratches or etch-a-sketches, and later in the campaign you could make some adjustments, and then people would forgive you. I think they're not going to forgive this character. Anyway, thank you, John Heilman. Thank you, David Corn.